I'm Sri Peruvemba. I've been in the electronic display industry for a number of years. I have the privilege of being here with Craig Bandys, the CEO of Pixelligent. I'm on the company's advisory board. Pixelligent is doing some amazing things, and we wanted to talk about that with the man himself. So with that, let's get started. Craig, you just came back from an event where you gave a keynote talk. Tell us about it.
It was a great event in Baltimore. And the title of the talk was really the strategic value of IP. And as you well know, IP is really a key value proposition for us and how we deliver our technology into the market and what makes it so special. But generally also what it takes to build a deep tech company, right? And it requires a whole different set of skills and stakeholders to really build something that's going to have a material effect in a market. And so it's not the same rules as when you do an app or some software, which have their own sets of challenges. But when you're doing deep tech, you have to invent new technology. You have to get patents. You have to learn how to make the product from those patents and then how to scale out those and up to manufacturing at mass production volume. And so all that takes a tremendous amount of time, patient capital, the right expertise, and also very close interaction with your key customers to make sure that the work you're doing at the end of the day, after those long cycles, is still relevant to what they need in their products.
Yeah, having been in this industry for a long time, for me, there are a few things which are somewhat common for startup companies: raising capital, hiring talent, taking the product from lab to mass production, and finding those key customers that are initially your champions to get it all done. And you've done some remarkable stuff in that space. So let's start with you did an amazing fundraise recently. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's actually been a year already. It's funny how fast that goes. But yeah, so it was, the markets were very tricky, in really starting the middle part of last year. We're all aware what happened with the public equity markets, but all just the debt markets and what was happening really across the globe. And the challenge you have as anybody trying to raise money is the challenge that will make investors the most concerned is uncertainty. And there was just a ton of uncertainty at that period of time. So we had to think about a new way to raise capital. We had looked at the whole world of SPACs. People were SPAC crazy. We got pulled into that a little bit. That goes in the column of things to be thankful for things that did not happen, because that, I think, was not the right path for companies like us. So we went down a different path, working with our bankers, and we were able to tap into this new source of funding around raising capital around the core value that we have, which is our intellectual property and our patents. And so we were able to close a fundraising around that of just under $40 million. And the way these transactions works is that they value your IP and then give you some fraction of that value in terms of the actual dollars, so they're very well collateralized against those loans. And so it's debt versus equity capital, which has its own different sets of positives and negatives. But we did, it was a critical round for us to really help continue our growth into our key markets, which today is really the main focus is in this area of extended reality, where we're getting most of our customer traction and where we're developing more and more products to serve the special needs of those customers.
Craig, it's all about innovation, isn't it, in this particular space? So tell us a little bit about your team that you hired and the technology that you have now scaled from lab, and talk about the innovation that Pixelligent is spearheading in this space.
When we think about innovation, and we get this question a lot from both customers and as well as investors. So you have this core technology. What's the most important part of what you have, right? Is it how you make the nanoparticles, which are these 3 nanometer to 10 nanometer core particles, which are metal oxides, which today for us is zirconia and titania, and soon to be, by the end of this quarter, barium titanate? Is it how you make those particles? Is it how you then go to the next stage, which is do the capping or the coating of those particles? Or is it how you manufacture those at scale? And the answer is yes, yes, and yes, right? Because they all have to be seamlessly working together to deliver the final product the customer wants. And so our innovation goes both across how we make the particles, which we have, I think, the best control sub 100 nanometer, even sub 50 nanometer particle development and construction in the world. And then to do that at scale is where most nanotechnology companies failed. right? So when I first looked at getting involved with Pixelligent, I wasn't a chemist. I've been in other businesses from software to IT services to telecom, a little bit of manufacturing. And so I first took a look at it and said, okay, what's happened in this world of nanotech? Why aren't there more successes? And it seemed like most companies failed in their ability to scale up. So they made these really unique particles in the lab, but they didn't really think about how to make those at mass production at the right quality, at the right price point, until too late in the process. So they locked into certain materials that just weren't scalable. So one thing we did when I got involved with Pixelligent and took over as CEO in 2009 was really had the mantra, we're not a science project, and if it can't be scaled and understood how we're going to scale it from the beginning, we really shouldn't spend any effort trying to figure out what it is. And so for us, we look at it in innovation, not just how do you make the particle, but how do you manufacture it at scale? And then the last piece is, how do we make sure it's going to work in our customers' mass production infrastructure? So we do a lot of partnering with the companies that make the end mass production tools early on to make sure that whatever we're making not only works well in our facilities, but works well in their facilities, and we'll get into the final product.
The technology is really cool. But what is even more cool is what is it used in, and what are the benefits to the end user? So say a little bit about, to the extent that you can talk about customers, but particularly about the type of applications that you're enabling.
The applications that we're enabling go across three main product categories. Extended reality, which for us is augmented reality, which are devices that will look like these at some point that we'll be wearing on our faces. And mixed reality, which I think more like the types of devices you see that have big visors in front of them when there's a lot of information overlaid. To the next market is in displays, mainly in mobile displays, and we'll talk about why. And then increasingly in the world of sensors and 3D printed optics. The key theme amongst all of these materials that we make for these products is that we focus on what's called high refractive index materials. And that's the ability to get more light into or out of a system, or better focus light in a way to make a device work better. In a device such as an augmented reality or mixed reality device, the key theme there is to have a very high refractive index in what's called the waveguide. The waveguide is essentially a channel that gets printed on the lenses that lets you have what's called the largest field of view and the eye box. What that means is, for a user, is that you'll see something in front of you which is well defined and at the right scale, so it makes sense to you. A good example would be if you have a small field of view looking at, let's call it, a rose on a stem, you'll see, 4 petals and 2 leaves if it's a small field of view. With a wide field of view, that technology like we have brings to market, you'll see the whole rose and the whole stem, right? And so it's the ability to see and capture the full image is critical for end customers to want to use these devices, and our material enables those sorts of improvements in optics in augmented and mixed reality. In display, where you care about, mainly for us in mobile display, you care about things like battery life, and you care about brightness of your screen when you're outside, and the heat if you have it up to your head. And so all of those are impacted by the ability to get more light out of those devices. And what happens today is light gets generated, but it gets trapped. Having our material inside that device lets more of that light have a natural pathway out of that device, which makes them brighter, lets the batteries last longer, and makes them less hot. And then the world of optics and sensors, which is newer for us, it's the higher the index in a sensor, the more light capture you can bring into these ever-shrinking sensors, and that's everything in terms of how data gets processed. And so these are the three key areas, all with the theme of high-index materials that are almost 95% plus transparent, have very low haze, we can control the film thickness, we can control the viscosity from a manufacturing perspective, and we call this being able to tune all of the critical knobs that customers need to put them into both their products but also into their manufacturing processes.
Craig, you've got traction in the market today, and obviously customers have many choices, and particularly when the market is global. How does Pixelligent differentiate itself? What is unique about the company and technology?
The main reason some of the biggest companies in the world come to us versus going to some of the much bigger, much more well-established materials companies is that we can meet a need for them in a way that those other bigger companies cannot. And it really goes down to the technology that we have and how we make our products based on that core technology. So the overall platform we actually call our PixClear process, and it's how we make each of our different products. So PixNil for nanoimprint lithography, PixJet for inkjetting capability, and Pix Clear and Pix Core, which are more nanoparticles that we formulate around for those industries. In Pixnil, it's more going after the AR, MR market. That's that nano imprint process that they use for that, using our material. For Pixjet, it's going after more of the mobile display market. But really what sets us apart is that up until, I'd say about 5 or so years ago, the refractive index of the organic materials that were out there, the organic resins, was high enough to get done what these big customers needed to get done. But now, as we're seeing things go and progress and go to next generation devices around new categories like augmented and mixed reality, more power hungry mobile devices with greater number of apps on them, and other mobile computing, those materials don't provide the right amount of functionality anymore. So you have to have a higher refractive index material to drive all the capability we've already been talking about. So we make the nanoparticles that drive that new set of properties that all of these new next-gen applications need. Up until about 2019, our model was just to make those particles and then partner with some of these big companies to really enable their materials and really breathe new life into their more commoditized type of monomers they've been selling for decades in some cases. Too long, we didn't get enough visibility when things weren't working, and we just weren't seeing the traction we needed. So starting in early 20, we decided, okay, we need to make the entire product, the entire formulation. And so fast forward to where we are today, because we make the most important critical part, which is the nanoparticle that delivers 90% of the value, and now also have the other components, the resin systems, the photoinitiator, be able to control viscosity based on loading and many other components, we're now the only company in the market that does a complete product in-house. Other competitors are buying commoditized raw materials like nanoparticles that don't have the same size and shape and surface quality we have, and for sure don't have the ability to do the capping we put on those to really make the interaction with the final system. So because we now control all aspects of it, we have what's called very detailed tunability. Almost think of it like a tuning board, in an audio company, right? So we have customers saying that we need this specific refractive index at this specific film thickness, with this residual layer thickness, with this viscosity, and when can we have it, right? And because we control all the components, we can deliver that to them in a way that really no one else in the market can.
These applications that you just described are being pursued by some of the best companies in the world. And you are providing a key ingredient that will just enable these applications. But to do all of this and achieve this kind of traction, obviously you have a very talented team. So tell us a little bit about your team and how you recruited talent and what type of a team that you have.
So we have people and scientists, we've got about 50 people today, about 25% are PhDs or so in that range. And in that level of expertise, the vast majority of those PhDs have been with the company, our founder, CTO, for over 16 years, 17 years. And and some of the other key scientists, going on 12, 15 type of years, 10 years. So great tenure, which is so unheard of a lot in what you see today in the world, especially of companies like at our stage and the challenges and risks that go along with those. So because of that, we just have a great embedded base of knowledge that we can pull from people that have been with us at really every major iteration of the technology. On top of that, you bring in some new young talent coming out of universities from around the world. They're bringing all the best practices in new technology and new capabilities in labs. We bring in then expertise that have built billions of dollars worth of infrastructure in manufacturing that have, one of our guys, our SVP of manufacturing and operations, was the head of manufacturing for the largest titanium manufacturer in the world, used to doing thousands of tons and tens of thousands of tons. We're not quite there yet, but we have the right person to get us there. And then, new folks that have come out from companies like BASF that are running our product development area now, and from a sales perspective, coming from places like 3M. So really, throughout all key aspects of the company, we for sure have the best and most experienced team we've had to date in the company. And when we look at boards, we have some really amazingly talented advisory board members.
Thank you.
We're still so happy that you decided to join us a few months ago. And working with you and others are able to tap into your knowledge base and your experiences with companies like us and help us learn things to avoid and maybe things to focus on, open up important relationships that we don't have today. And then our corporate board are also executives that have built billions of dollars of market cap and revenue in some of the most successful technology companies out there. And so we get the oversight coming to us from the advisors and from the board, and then we have the team that can really execute on that direction and that advice to be able to deliver what we need to do for our customers.
So what are you hearing from customers about current trends in their products and how your technology helps them? And then what are you hearing about where they are going and how you will aim your company to meet their needs in the future?
It varies by segment, right? So we'll start with the one that we're spending most time on today, which is extended reality. So we have customers, some of the largest consumer electronics companies we work with around the world, and both in the US and in Asia and in Europe. And so in particular with extended reality, we're seeing two themes really develop. One is with the larger consumer electronics companies trying to make really amazing full feature devices that have amazing technology built into them where you can see screens in front of you and you can use your hands to make the gestures you need to, but they're very technically intensive. They're expensive today still because the components are not scaled yet. And it takes a lot of battery and energy, so there's power issues. But when they come to market, they're going to be unbelievable. And we talk about the next great computing platform, spatial computing, that's that, right? Then we have a different set of customers, and these are mainly in Asia, where they're more focused on what we're calling a feature-focused device, where it's a streamlined headset that is also lighter, it has longer battery life, but it's focusing on one thing, sports, or a specific sport, or in a hobby, or in training. It's a green screen. It can last 3 hours in battery. It's very light. It has the right price point of sub $500 to $1,000, and those customers are buying them not in the millions yet, but in the thousands and tens of thousands. So we're starting to see some of that volume grow in our business from a manufacturing perspective. But they're also getting the customers comfortable in wearing those devices, right? So we're working with both ends of the market, if you will. Where we're seeing everyone go to is wanting to have devices that look more like my glasses and your glasses, where you can have an overlay of reality in front of you, that are comfortable to wear, they're lightweight, that have long power, long battery life, and aren't a big power drain on the device. And so, how do we continue to innovate and bring out materials that can do that? We rolled out one recently called PixCore, which is a material that has high index, but also deals with what's called absorption, which is essentially when lenses will start to turn a little yellow, because titania, which is a key part of our material set for this market, naturally has that tendency to yellow. And you don't want a lot of yellow on a lens, right? So we're having materials that we're developing come to market that are starting to solve some of these most critical problems for customers. Now, not every lens has to be exposed to sunlight. Some have big UV blockers like sunglasses. There, they just want high index. They're not so worried about that. So our focus is to have a broad portfolio of products that can really fit each of these key areas our customers need in their product portfolios. When we move over to something like OLED display, here it's a little more defined. We know specifically customers want to have a mobile device that has longer battery life and is brighter, mainly in the OLED world, because the materials inside of the OLED device that make them so vibrant, the colors, they also drain a lot of the light. And so you need to have materials that get more of that light out without draining too much battery. So that's where we come in there. And we're seeing more customers that we're trying other ways to solve that problem, realizing those may not have been the best or most optimal way to do it, that are now coming back and focusing more time with us with our technology, and we're getting deeply engaged there. So, this is something we've been working on for 5 years, and it was interesting to lots of customers, and then they said, we're going to go down a different path. We had to sit back and wait and be patient, which is painful, and then waited, and then finally we're seeing them come back to us now because we think our solution is probably the most elegant and lowest cost application they can use to get that in their product. And I think in the world of sensors, we're still early in that business. So that's an area that we're still figuring out exactly where we can have the best products for those customers.
Craig, it's one thing to build something in the lab, and scaling is a whole other thing. And you've been very successful doing something like that. And tell us about that experience.
This was one of the more challenging areas when we started taking the products out to talk to customers. We were able to figure out the scale-up code by bringing in the right people. We spent, as I said earlier, early time in the lab looking at only materials that we had a high level of confidence would scale, and then proving that out every step along the way to get there. We would go talk to customers and say, hey, we have these products, and they'd say, well, The challenge is, we've worked with companies in the nano field before, and they'd say they have these great products, but then we go to say, okay, send us, a kg or 10 kgs or 100 kgs, and how are you going to get us to 10 tons? And there really wasn't a strategy around that. And so one thing we did, early on was to really make sure that we could show these customers that we could manufacture the quantities that they would need at scale when the products got qualified, and we would invite them in, right? And so one of our most expensive marketing investments has been our manufacturing line, because we would invite them in to show that we have, in fact, the ability to not only make the particles in the lab with some of the leading edge quality control technology, we can also do it at mass production volumes. We're certified to sell it, in all regulatory frameworks throughout the world. And we figured that out for them. We're ISO certified. We have, in the US, TSCA compliance. We have one of the best safety records in the chemical manufacturing industry. So we put aside all of their concerns about engaging with us in a serious way, because they see we have the manufacturing footprint figured out.
We are here in Silicon Valley, and you're actually shipping to customers here in Silicon Valley, which is not intuitive. Usually people would expect us to be shipping in Asia, and you're also shipping into Europe. Tell us about the global customer base that you have.
It's one of the things that was the most challenging for me to figure out when I first took over the company. And we're this small company growing in Baltimore, but all of a sudden a lot of the demand was coming from places pretty far away, right? And so you're right, today we have a number of customers here on the West Coast. We also have a number of customers in Europe, and really throughout Asia. Really, I can pretty well cover it in the major countries in electronics. And so the hard part is, how do you service them? How do you get to them? How do you understand what their requirements are? How do you even get them materials? Nanomaterials, by their nature, are a very highly regulated material to get them imported into a country. And so you have to figure out all of the regulatory framework as well of how do you get the products where you need them to be in compliance, because if they're not, they're going to sit in the port, and you'll have very angry customers. And that's happened over time as you learn some of these things, right? So I think for us, it was, okay, we'll make the product here. For now, we're also thinking about ways of doing that with some strategic partners over in Asia at some point here in the not too distant future. But everything is made here today in Baltimore. And so then how do we service these customers? So we started building distribution partnerships and channels with distributors in Japan and in Korea and in Taiwan and in China today are the 4 big ones for us. And then we have country managers in Korea and in Taiwan that help cover Korea, Taiwan, Japan. And so we had to figure out, how do we extend ourselves? And so it's really important to be able to scale, not just to your point, I think, not just the materials and production, but how do you scale these global relationships? And they take a lot of care and feeding. They take having local representation in those markets to make sure you can service them properly. And it just takes there's no substitute for the FaceTime, especially when there's an issue you're trying to work through to get into a final step to get into production, like we're seeing now in XR with a number of customers in Asia.
You're already in some applications today. Tell us about it. And then what is that application that you're personally looking forward to?
Great question. The applications we're in today goes back to that concept of feature-focused versus full feature. So today they're feature-focused. So they're in markets in Asia that are more consumer-driven, in things like the cycling market and other hobby type of markets. And those are devices that started to get shipped this year. We're starting to see growth in those. We're starting to see an extension of some of those other products coming in around different types of niche areas where these could go. And we have, a pretty long-term visibility by working closely with our customers, that goes from 23 to product introductions really through 2027. But all that work started 2.5 years ago, right? This isn't a market where you go to a customer, show them something like, great, we're going to put it in next week. The qualification process, the scale-up process, and then lining up their introduction process and timing of when they want to announce a product all have to come together. So it takes a while to get to this momentum, which we have now today. Fast forward, the types of devices that are exciting are those, right? But you start to look at what's been announced recently, and having something where you could have from a business perspective, a Zoom-like call in front of you. We're able to see everyone in a conference room like you're sitting with them, have interactions, put up your different PowerPoints, and be in a team environment that doesn't really work today the way it's set up right now. From a personal standpoint, I love the idea of having the freedom to walk around a foreign city, have automatic translation for me, have maps of where I want to go, have subway and train schedules, and be able to interact in a way that is truly hands-free with information as I need it, when I need it, I think would be a really cool thing for all of us. And then there's really important applications in things like medical applications and training applications. And these things, again, these are not, 10 years away. These are happening now. The software is being built now. The apps are being built now. And we're going to see these coming out on devices that we will all be wearing, over the next 2 to 3 years as we see this market continues to develop. The last thing I'd like to add to that is what is my vision for where I want to see Pixelligent going forward. I want it to be so well known that the quality of our material that when you're wearing a headset and the optics in front of you are crystal clear and it's lightweight and it's an application that you wear with almost not even thinking about it anymore and the technology just in front of you. If I could borrow a phrase that's probably been overused, but the Pixelligent inside concept, to know that if we're a part of it, it's the highest quality material that you could have in the device you're wearing that's creating the best possible user experience.
So Craig, what's next for the company?
We have a really robust product pipeline. In some cases, it's both a benefit and a bit of a challenge because there's a lot of directions we can take our technology into. We identify this broad platform of technology really around nanomaterial-based metal oxides. And there are, dozens and dozens of combinations. We've locked in on about 25 of them that we have high confidence, and we are starting to prove this out, that our PixClear process of how we make the nanoparticle, cap it, control the surface, and then integrate it into a formulation, that we have the ability to do that based on our current technology and platform. And a lot of our intellectual property, both our patents and for sure our trade secret around how we manufacture these things at scale, speak to these other materials. So today we talked about zirconia and titania are products that are in market. We formulate around right now in these applications for augmented mixed reality and displays and sensors. We're about to roll out barium titanate, which can be used in some of those as well, but also is our first true electronic-based material. It has what's called the very high dielectric constant. So for things like MLCCs, which are, think of them as dampeners in your cell phone and your mobile devices and even in EVs to deal with some of the noise you have from the electronics communicating in those things. Invisible antennas, which are in all of our devices. So now we're moving into a new market for us. We're learning a lot about it. We're joining consortiums. We're figuring that out. Beyond that, though, there's another 20 metal oxide systems, and of those, 7 of them we've already started to work with in a lab scale to start to think about what comes out next, right? And so for us, it's, it takes a while to get to this place where, to get to the point where we built up this infrastructure to call it PixClear process, it took, the better part of 8 or 9 years, right? And now we're able to see that although that most of that time was just spent with the zirconia, and then on the back end of that with titania, we're now able to apply all of that learning with both our understanding of how these materials work, along with our technology platform. And starting 2.5 years ago, we rolled into our first AI platform. And so it takes a long time to understand how to use a platform like this. The hardest part is populating it. So initially, it just started as a lab information management system, just populating it with as much data, getting it out of our scientists' notebooks, which they love and hold dear to their hearts, to get them to put that down and trust the system. And so we started getting more and more data in that, and we started to see the value of this system. And in fact, the PixJet material I talked about, that new product family, was developed using that AI platform for us in record time, in terms of 1/10 the time of what it typically would have taken in a brute force method of trying to see which formulation was successful based on all these components. So for us, in many ways, we feel like we've taken all of this time to build a really solid foundation. For us, it's a solid IP foundation and trade secret foundation and manufacturing foundation. And now we're going to start to accelerate getting more of these materials through that process that helps us get more products out to market more quickly.
Craig, thank you so much for your time. This has been fun.
Yeah, great. Thank you for participating and agreeing to do this today. Had a great time. It's always great to spend time with you, and it's great that we get to do all this work together.